Chapter 10 is called The Pens. We had soon passed through the 2 doors, the first being locked behind us by one of the white-gowned women, the second by the 2 guardsmen. In the hallway we passed 4 female slaves, naked, on their hands and knees, with sponges, rags, and buckets, cleaning the tiles of the corridor. A male slave stood near, a heavy band of iron around his throat, a whipping strap dangling from his right hand. "This is an interesting room," said Ho-Tu, opening a door and leading me through. "Sometimes it is guarded, but now it is empty." Once again I found myself staring through a large rectangle of glass, but this time there was only one such panel. "Yes," said Ho-Tu, "the other side is a mirror." On our side of the glass there was a metal grille-work with rectangular openings about 12 inches long and 4 inches high. I gathered that this was in case someone on the other side would attempt to break the mirror. In the room, which had no occupant, I saw an open wardrobe closet, some chests of silk, a silken divan of immense size, several choice rugs and cushions around, and a sunken bath to one side. It might have been the private compartment of a lady of high caste, save that, of course, in this house it was a cell. "It is used for special captures," said Ho-Tu. "Sometimes," he added, "Cernus amuses himself with women kept in this room, leading them to believe that if they serve him well, they will be well treated." Ho-Tu laughed. "After they yield to him, they are sent to the iron pens." "And if they do not yield?" I asked. "Oh, then," said Ho-Tu, "they are strangled in the chain which bears the crest of the house of Cernus." I looked down into the room. "Cernus does not like to lose," said Ho-Tu. "I gather not," I said. "When using a woman," said Ho-Tu, "Cernus is in the habit of placing a chain around her neck." I looked at him. "It encourages docility and effort," said Ho-Tu. "I expect it does," I said. "You do not seem much pleased with the house of Cernus," observed Ho-Tu. "Are you?" I asked. "Ho-Tu?" He looked up at me, surprised. "I am well paid," he said, and then he shrugged. "Most of the house you have seen," he said, "with the exception of the training areas, the iron pens, the processing rooms, and such." "Where are the women who were brought to the Voltae last night in the black ship?" "They're in the kennels," he said. "Follow me." On the way down the stairs to the lower portions of the cylinder, several floors of which incidentally are below ground level, we passed the office of Capris. I saw Elizabeth there in the hallway outside, carrying armfuls of scrolls. Seeing me, she fell to her knees and put down her head, managing somehow to retain her hold on the several scrolls. "I see that your training has not begun even yet," I said rather sternly. She didn't speak. "Her training," said Ho-Tu, "will begin soon." "What are you waiting for?" I asked. "It is an idea of Cernus," said Ho-Tu. "He wants to train first a small set of barbarian slaves. She will be numbered among those in the first set." "The girls who were brought in last night?" I asked. "Only 2 of them will be in her set," said Ho-Tu. "The remaining 8 will be divided into 2 larger sets and trained separately." "Barbarians, I have heard," I said, "do not train well." "It is our belief," said Ho-Tu, "that much can be done with a barbarian girl. It remains to be proven, of course." "But such would not likely to bring a high price," I observed. "Who knows what may be the case by the month of Anvar?" asked Ho-Tu, "or perhaps even by Ankara." Should the experiment be successful, I said, it seems the house of Cernus will have the largest supply of such girls. Ho-Tu smiled. Of course, he said. You already have several in the pens? I speculated. Yes, said Ho-Tu, and more are obtained with each rendezvous. Elizabeth looked up as though puzzled at this, as though she did not understand the reference, and then dropped her head again. When will you begin the training? I asked. When the two new girls chosen for the first set grow weary of the kennels and of the gruel of the iron pens. Do girls in training not eat such gruel? I asked. Girls in training, said Ho-Tu, partake of the finest of slave porridges. They are given mats to sleep on, and later their training furs. They are seldom in chains. Sometimes they are even permitted under guard to leave the house, that they may be stimulated and pleased by the sights of our. Do you hear that, little Vella? I asked. Yes, master, said Elizabeth, not lifting her head. Further, said Ho-Tu, after the first few weeks of training, if sufficient progress is made, they will be permitted foods other than slave porridges. Elizabeth looked up brightly. One might even say, said Ho-Tu, they will be well fed. Elizabeth smiled. In order that they may bring, added Ho-Tu, looking at Elizabeth, a higher price. And Elizabeth looked down. At that time we heard the 15th bar. Elizabeth looked up at me. You are permitted to leave, I told her. She sprang up and returned to the office of Capris, who was closing the top of the desk before which he stood. She replaced the scrolls in the pigeonholes of a scroll bin, and Capris slid the cover over the bin and locked it. Then, with a word to him, she ran lightly past us and disappeared down the hall. Oh, with speed like that, said Ho-Tu, smiling, she will not be the last to arrive at the porridge trough. I looked at Ho-Tu and smiled. He lifted his shaved head to me, and the black eyes met mine. He scratched his left shoulder. He stood squarely there before me, and then he grinned. You are a strange one for an assassin, he said. Are we now to go to the pens? I asked. It's the 15th bar, said Ho-Tu. Let us go to the table. After we have eaten, I will show you the pens. Here and there down the hall I could see slaves hurrying in one direction or another, depending on the location of their feeding quarters. I could also see members of the staff moving about, and could hear doors being closed and locked. All right, I said. Let us eat. There were various matches in the pit of sand that evening. There was a contest of sheathed hook knife, one of whips, and another of spiked gauntlets. One of the slave girls spilt wine and was fastened to a slave ring, stripped and beaten. Later the musicians played, and a girl I hadn't seen before, whom I was told was from Kos, performed the collar dance, and creditably. Cernus, as before, was lost in his game with Capris, this time lingering at the board even long after Parga and full-strength Kalina was served. Why is it, I asked Ho-Tu, whom I felt I had come to know somewhat better in the day, that when others have Kalina and meat and bread and honey, you eat only this porridge? Ho-Tu pushed back the bowl. It is not important, he said. Oh, very well, I said. The horn spoon snapped in his hands, and he angrily threw the pieces to the bowl. I nodded. He rose. I will take you to the pens now, he said. I indicated the door to one side, through which the night before the shackled slave had been led, through which Cernus had left as well. This night I had been pleased to note that none of the slaves who had come out poorly in their contests had been shackled and led through the door. The slave who had won at hook the night before, I observed, was again eating at the foot of the table. The collar had been taken from his throat. I gathered he might now be free. There was a whipping strap looped about his belt, and in the belt sheathed was a hook knife, the hilt buckled down in the sheath, as was the case with that of Ho Tu. "The thing you call the beast lies through that door," said Ho Tu, looking at me narrowly. "I would like to see it," I said. Ho Tu paled, and then he smiled. "Pray to the priest-kings that you'll never see it." "You know nothing of the beast?" I asked. "Cairnes and certain others," he said, "can look upon it, and they alone." He looked at me closely. "Do not be curious, killer," he said, "for commonly those who look upon the beast do so only in death." "I trust," I said, "it is safely caged." Ho Tu smiled. "I trust so," he said. "How often is it fed?" I asked. "It can eat many times a day," said Ho Tu, "but it can also endure long periods without food. Normally we feed it a slave every 10 days. A live slave?" I asked. "It likes to make its own kills," said Ho Tu. "Well, as long as it's safely caged," I remarked, "I gather there is no danger." "Fear of the beast keeps good order in the house of Cairnes," said Ho Tu. "I expect it does," I admitted. "Come," said Ho Tu, "I will show you the pens." That's the end of the chapter.